Hey Ben, I caught you mid sip there. So sorry about that. So hello out there. We got quite a few people watching right now. So thank you so much for tuning in. This is kind of a new experiment in the first Wednesday lecture series. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ben here to say a few words. Then we will jump back on here in a second and get started with our interview with author and historian Drew Gomber, and then open it up to some questions. So, all right, Ben, we'll see you in just a minute. The first Wednesday lecture series. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben here to say a few words. Then we will jump back on here in a second and get started with our interview with author and historian Drew Gomber, and then open it up to some questions. So, all right, Ben.
Yes, welcome all. This is Ben Woodbury. I'm with the New Mexico History Museum's Friends of History, and we have been I want to thank the historic sites, Tim Roberts in particular, but all the staff that's helped to make this possible. This is our first effort to do an online video. Of course, we're doing this in response to the COVID-19 event, but at the same time, this is as we become more familiar with this, we the Friends are looking to see about doing online presentations and after the fact recordings with online, so that we can make the speakers that we have invited to make a presentation, to give them the opportunity to give the widest possible exposure, and also as part of our effort within the History Museum to give, to share New Mexico history. As I said, we want to thank Tim and all of the historic sites folks who have helped to make this possible, and we look forward to working with them and with others in the future in our efforts to try to develop this. But we'll see how we'll do our best. Thanks, Tim. I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that, and thank you for joining us today. So this is a little bit of a new format, like Ben was saying. So the way we got it, I actually have Drew on the phone, and we're going to be doing our interview via the phone. But if you guys have any questions for Drew or myself, feel free to put them in the comments, and we will answer them as to the best of our ability. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Drew, can you hear me?
I sure can.
All right. Very good. Well, hold on. There we go. Much better. All right. Technical difficulty. All right. So thank you for joining us today, Drew, and I appreciate it. So it's interesting. I'm sitting in Fort Sumner.
Yeah, and I'm sitting in Lincoln.
Yes. So we're kind of on two ends of the Billy the Kid spectrum, so to speak, doing this. So when I talked to Ben about doing this program, the question was, well, what would we want to talk about? And I think, obviously Billy the Kid and his story in the Lincoln County War are events and characters that a lot of people know about. And I think it's one of the interesting things to me is how and why people know about these events. So the idea was to kind of talk a little bit about the kind of public memory of Billy the Kid and his legacy, so to speak, in terms of history, culture, popular culture, and things like that. And so
that's actually an interesting topic, because right after the Lincoln County War, the general consensus was that the Murphy Dolan faction were the good guys.
Okay.
And that changed with the movies.
So that's interesting. If you look at some of those early the information that was coming out during Billy's lifetime and even right afterwards, he was not painted in a positive light. In fact, I mean, some of the early Pulp Fiction kind of novels and things like that. I mean, he was basically labeled a cold-blooded killer. That was his legacy, really.
And which also led to his own remark about people seem to think I was half animal or something, because I'm sure reading that sort of press about himself was a little damaging to his ego.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Even I remember reading. I think it was the newspaper in Tombstone in 1880 posted or basically fabricated the story about how Billy walked into one of John Chisholm's cow camps and without any word shot and killed one of his cowboys and told the other three that he let live supposedly to run back to John Chisholm and tell him that he was coming for him. Completely fabricated even during his lifetime.
Yeah.
So,
that's difficult too.
Yeah.
Especially for that time. And that's the thing, man. So many historians, quote unquote, got their information from those dime novels that were so popular in the 70s, 80s, the last century, or century before last, sorry. And the distortion over the years has been incredible. It really has.
Sure. So I have, you and I know a lot of people who are passionate about the history of the Southwest and in particular the Lincoln County War and the Billy the Kid story. So I like to ask this question. What got you interested in Billy the Kid? What was kind of your introduction to Billy and the story?
Well, when I was a little boy, my dad saw I was watching all these bad old Billy the Kid movies with like Buster Crabbe and such, and he brought home from the library one night the saga of Billy the Kid, which I read in a day or two, and after that I was always looking for more information, and there wasn't any for many years. And then people like Fred Nolan and Bob Utley and people like that were writing about Billy and the war and everything, and all of a sudden things became a lot more clear. But as I said earlier, at the time, the Murphy Dolan guys were considered to be the good guys, and in fact, as the years have gone by, I have a lot more sympathy for Jimmy Dolan than I once did. I don't think he was that bad of a guy at all. In fact, he led a pretty good life after the war, and I don't think he did anything. I mean, they all committed crimes, no doubt about it. But to me, the real villain of the Lincoln County War was Alexander McSween.
Interesting. I think there's probably some people listening that might have a different opinion, but you like you said, you spend a lot of time looking at these things, and opinions ebb and flow, and you learn more. You examine more evidence and things like that. So.
Yeah, well, and too many of us get our history from the movies these days, and so if you're getting your history from Young Guns, you're probably not doing it justice. But still, it's interesting to find out the real stuff that went down, as you know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and it's so much more complex than people that have spent good chunks of their life researching it like yourself. I mean, you learn new things all the time. So,
right.
Yeah,
that is too true. Yes.
And you brought up the saga of Billy the Kid, Walter Noble Burns' book that came out, I think, in 1926.
Right.
That was really that was a turning point for Billy. I think there were historians that were working at the same time. Especially here in New Mexico and Roswell and some folks there. But that book introduced you. You're one of probably a dozen what I would consider Billy the Kid scholars that I know whose first introduction to Billy the Kid was that book. I think that had a huge impact on people's view of Billy, especially as kind of sympathetic character, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think that's okay to go with. I just what I object to is the inclination of too many writers to make it a good guys and bad guys situation, which is not. It never was. There were good guys and bad guys on both sides. You know, I mean,
Sure.
you know, now they consider the kid and the regulators the good guys, but that would mean that the good guys were shooting through children to kill Sheriff Brady on April 1st, 1878.
Sure. Yeah.
The kids in the street where Brady was walking.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think Walter Noble Burns, the term had not been coined yet, really. The idea of like a social Robin Hood, right? That didn't really come around to the 1950s. But he created, the image of Billy the Kid he created was really one of this social Robin Hood, somebody that was fighting for justice in his own way, right? And he did make it very, very clear cut, very black and white, right? There were the guys wearing black hats and there were the guys wearing white hats.
Yeah, and Billy was a Billy killer.
Huh.
Of the 4 guys he killed that we know of the 4 men he killed, 3 of them were known as Billies, and the only one he ever expressed regret about was J.W. Brower, who he said it was the case to have to not want to.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's something, and I'm sure you've people have brought this to your attention. I think there's a common misconception among, especially what we do at, say, Lincoln or Fort Stanton or Fort Sumner for that matter. The interpretation that we put forth, we're not glorifying, Billy's actions, in terms of his crimes. We're simply telling a story. And I think people tend to get hooked on that we're somehow, putting forth this idea that it was all justified and things. And I don't think anybody that studies this sort of thing believes, that, like you said, like it's cut and dry. Sure.
Which is, interesting in itself. Not just the kids, but all of the others, on both sides.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for those who wanted to, there's always been people who wanted to paint the Lincoln County War as an English-Irish extension of those problems, and that was not the case because they were English and Irish on both sides.
Sure.
In fact, one of Jimmy Dolan's best men was Andy Ball, who was a former British soldier that served in India.
Ah.
Yeah. So, it's like I say, they're all human and they're all flawed, and that's what kind of makes it fun,
Yeah. No.
A lot of these people we probably wouldn't want to meet in real life, especially in a dark alley. But still, that doesn't mean they're any less interesting.
Gotcha. So, all right. Well, we're going to try to get the. People were saying that the audio is not great, and I apologize for that. We'll try to make that a little bit better. So, Drew, we talked a little bit about your introduction to Billy the Kid. What physically brought you out to New Mexico? I mean, that was a pretty. We've talked about this. We're both from the East Coast originally, so. Oh, okay. So, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. People are saying that the audio they can hear me, but they can't hear you. So I'm trying to figure that out. Hopefully, better. Give me 1 second. We're gonna try to fix this out. So give me.
Is this any better?
Maybe. Let me talk to. We're gonna troubleshoot this on the fly. So
okay.
Give me a second here.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah. So, hey Ben, can you hear Drew now a little bit better?
Just in the last couple of comments.
Okay.
Not as strong as yourself. Perhaps Drew should make try to be sure he's speaking close to the phone.
Well, I think I've got if you could hear the last couple of comments, I think we got it nailed in as good as we're going to get. We'll try. If give me a thumbs down because I can see you if he goes out again. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
all right.
Down on the lower left. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I find interesting, Drew, and maybe you can talk a little bit to this, is that, the Billy's image kind of reflects the mood of the moment, so to speak,
Right.
in my opinion. I think about, obviously Walter Noble Burns and this idea of a Robin Hood character, but then you get back, to say the 1970s. And,
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
when they were
you got
debunking everything.
Exactly.
Whether it needed debunking or not.
Yes, and then you also, you have movies coming out. We had, it was a Cold War era, and the Vietnam War was going on, and there's a lot of cynicism in America. So then you get, movies like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which I would definitely not consider, that's a very, very different view of him.
Well, what about Dirty Little Billy?
Oh yeah,
Michael Dave Ballard as Billy. That was so bad. There's a difference. Basically, just reflects the times that the view is being expressed in.
Sure.
Sure. And right now, Billy's, to most people, he's a hero. But I got a feeling that'll change.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. The latest movie that came out about Billy the Kid, I actually have not seen it. Have you seen The Kid?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I've heard mixed things about it, but I don't. What was your view on how he was kind of portrayed as a character, as a person?
I liked the way he was portrayed at first, but then towards the end, he turns into whiny, complaining little Billy, and that was just not in character. And plus, the scene where there's also a scene where Paulita Maxwell tells him she's pregnant, and he storms off in a rage, refusing to marry her. I doubt it. I doubt he ever even knew such a thing. But on the other hand, the actor who played Billy, Dane DeHaan, was the best I've ever seen, at least in the beginning.
Oh.
He looks like him.
Huh.
And to a great extent, he did a really good Billy for the first part of the movie. But then, like I say, when they kind of, it's all about this kid who's getting advice from Billy and Pat Garrett. Well, guess who he's going to listen to? More than the other. He'll listen to Pat Garrett, who will become a father figure to him. But the kid will just kind of betray him. It's a pretty bad movie.
Interesting. Well, I'll still give it a shot just to add it to the old lexicon of movies. I mean, I think it's so interesting. I mean, I think Buster Crabbe alone played Billy in 13 movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Aaron Copland scored a ballet about Billy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's become such a iconic character. I have my own most interesting people I've met who come to Lincoln to learn about Billy. What are some of the people that you have met that you would consider some of the most unique? Like why are you here and how did you learn about this type people?
Why am I here?
No, like why the folks from the farthest distance, like the strangest place that you've met someone from that knew about this story, and it's made you wonder how, right? How did it make it to that?
My wife Elise.
Okay. Okay.
who came here, much like I did actually, from the East Coast. She was from Pennsylvania, but she was just interested in the Lincoln County War and moved out here because of it. That's how we met.
Wow.
But people come from all over for this stuff, even as far away as Europe and Japan. But and it's fascinating to me how many people know who Billy the Kid is. I mean, more people in Europe know who Billy the Kid is than George Washington, for Christ's sake. Excuse me.
So no, I get that. All right. Well, yeah. So I posted a video the other day, just kind of giving people kind of a virtual tour of the courthouse, and it got quite a bit of traction. I think people are just interested in that building and the fact that it's still there. And so, speaking of Billy's escape, what are some of the things that you think of that are the most interesting, unique aspects of that whole episode in history?
Well, as you probably know, I don't really go in for conspiracy theories and kind of across the board. And for that reason, I feel that the kid did turn on the stairwell, did attack the unexpected Bell, and wrestled Bell's gun away from him, and he did shoot him on the stairwell. I don't think there was a gun left for him in the privy or any other kind of conspiracy. I think that's exactly what he did. And when he got the pistol, he told Bell not to run. Bell thought better of it, decided to run down the stairs. The kid shot, fired twice, hit him once, and killed him. But you know, if he was such a cold-blooded killer, he wouldn't have even given the guy a chance, number one. And number two, he would have killed more people on his way out of the courthouse. Instead, he winds up making a speech. And although I did read an account of a guy who saw Bob Ollinger's body. He was a kid at the time, and he said it was an image that would stay with him for the rest of his life.
That's an interesting point.
Pretty close range with that shotgun, you know.
That's an interesting point. We oftentimes forget about the kind of the collateral damage, you know, the psychological trauma of living through that Lincoln County War, the community members.
Oh yeah. It's fascinating. Listen, there's a recording by, I'm sure you're aware of it, by Amelia Bolton Church, who was a kid during the Lincoln County War, well, teenager, and she saw the kid escape from Tunstall store after the assassination of Brady and all this other stuff. And but her comments are really interesting because she likes people you don't expect her to like, and she doesn't like people that you do expect her to like. And she was here, you know. So it's funny how that works.
Yeah, I think, you know, in the last couple of decades, there has been, you know, a concerted effort by historians and authors like yourself to tell those broader stories from the points of view of those whose voices, you know, have not necessarily been the loudest throughout history. Right.
And sometimes they're the most important too. But, you know, Amelia, you know, for my money, she gives the best account of the death of Brady and everything else because she was standing right there on the street. And she also names the kid, as you may be aware of this, I'm sure you are actually, she names the kid as being the guy under the floor in the Tunstall store after the Brady assassination, and that she then saw him escaping 2 hours after the murder. And the guy even asked her, the interviewer says, "Are you sure it was the kid?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I knew him well." It's like, I never thought I'd ever hear anybody say that. But, you know, all that sort of thing, you know, that preconceived notions that we have about a lot of these incidences and gun battles and all this other stuff that just didn't happen.
Sure.
You know, at least not the way they've come down to us.
No, and I think, you know, we do, you know, as historians and, you know, we try to imagine these things ourselves, you know, and oftentimes I find it difficult to, you know, kind of put these images in my own head without the bias of having, you know, falling back on a scene I saw in a movie. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I know. I have the same problem. We all do. It's, you know, it's just difficult. We're so indoctrinated by the time we get into actually reading about the real events that it becomes difficult to marry the two, you know?
No, absolutely. So yeah, there's actually, you know, getting into maybe a little bit of details about, talked about this, and I'm actually, you know, not that I was never, you know, willing to think about this, but I'm actually kind of in your camp now, about the fact that I don't think that Ollinger was at what we know as the Wortley Hotel.
That's a good possibility, but that's all. So far, that's all I can say, though. It's just a possibility, because I also found an account where somebody mentioned the 5 prisoners sitting out in front of the Wortley on the porch, not on the porch, on the stoop.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, so that kind of, you know, I don't know, you know, and I don't know that anybody's ever gone, I know for certain. What we're talking about is the fact that Bob Ollinger was always thought to be at the Wortley Hotel with the other prisoners, getting them some food. And Sam Wortley not only owned the Wortley Hotel, but he owned a tent restaurant that was closer, actually, to the courthouse. And there is a possibility that that was where they're going and not the Wortley Hotel, because they just said the Wortley back in the day. And if that is the case, that would make all of the eyewitness accounts, including Godfrey Gauss, who drew a map, and it showed Ollinger coming from directly across the street.
Huh. Yeah.
As you know,
and I found something interesting. Actually at that time, Sam Wortley didn't even own that hotel. And it was actually owned by the Ellis family at that time. And one of the best, it's interesting. There were probably 200 people surrounding that courthouse by the time Billy trotted off, but there were really only a handful of people that put down on paper their remembrance of it, and very few at the time of the event. And one of the ones that did, though, and he put it anonymously, but I think most people think it was probably Sam Corbett sent an article to the Silver City paper, and in it he talks about how he was with Ben Ellis, and it seems to me that if he was with Ben Ellis, clearly he knew him, he knew that his family owned that hotel at the time. Why would it would be strange that he wouldn't refer to it as his or Ellis's or something like that, because Sam Wortley hadn't owned it for a few years.
But I think that most of the people were talking after the fact.
Sure.
And to them, it was just the Wortley by then.
Well, and I think that might, it's almost kind of like a, I don't even know how to, a cart before the horse type situation. I don't know, I think that building became known as the Wortley because of that event. I think if that event hadn't happened necessarily, we would know it now as the Lincoln Inn, right? Which it was known as for most of its life. I think
all those pictures of the soldiers standing in front of it and everything. Yeah.
So sure. It's an interesting. That's the kind of minutia that is kind of fun to get into sometimes. With these things. So.
Yeah. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's frustrating too.
Sure.
But yeah.
One of the accounts of that escape that I prescribe to, just because I haven't had anybody, be able to show me anything that would definitively say it's not accurate, is John Meadows' account that he says Billy told him. Do you believe that Billy went to John Meadows' house and actually talked to him?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Actually, that account sounds real accurate to me. The fact that the kid walked in joking with him is kind of indicative of that too,
Okay.
Because if he was making up a story, it'd be more dramatic. But instead, he's got the kid walking in, and they're laughing about beans and farts and stuff,
Yeah.
So, I'm inclined to believe him. Yes.
No, interesting. All right. Well, so what, in terms of kind of the mood of this moment, in your experience, what is Billy's legacy meant to you and some of the other, why do you think people are so just infatuated with this story?
I think because, always when you die young, that's always a good beginning. But I think people are infatuated with it because of this whole social bandit thing. I think, especially, after growing up with the movies, a lot of people just want to believe that, Billy wasn't greedy. Billy just wanted to have fun, anything, none of which is true. He and Fred Wade were planning on ranching on the Rio Bonito. Of course, that was changed by the Lincoln County War, but still.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I kind of drifted away there. What was the question again?
Oh, no, we were just talking about, why people are infatuated with the character of Billy the Kid. And why not, why did it take so long for people to become, interested in, say, the character of John Tunstall or John Chisholm? You know what I mean? What was it about Billy?
Yeah, interesting to me, even as recently as the documentaries that I've been in, they always try to make Tunstall into an older man so that he makes a better father figure to Billy. And you know as well as I do that Tunstall was 3 weeks short of his 25th birthday when he died.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the movies have a lot to do with how we see anything these days.
Oh, sure.
More than ever before.
Sure. So, you know, you're an active historian. You're an active author. You're engaged with the scholarship surrounding the Lincoln County War and its impact on New Mexico. You know, where are you working on anything? Are you looking at any other angles right now that people might not have kind of overlooked a little bit in the past, or you know, other people in the field that you know of, or the kind of new questions being asked?
Well, yeah, and there's your former employee Scott, a friend of ours. Scott and I are talking about doing a book together.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because, you know, as you know, Scott researches the hell out of anything obscure, and which is great. And I can write around whatever he finds to make it, you know, and get it into a more entertaining fashion. But I think we could come up with something that would be pretty neat that had never been printed before.
Great, yes. And Drew's talking about Scott Smith. He's a former manager at Coronado and Jemez Historic Sites, and also over here at Fort Sumner. And he just recently retired after 30 years with New Mexico Historic Sites, and he is a dogged researcher. He is one of the things he and I co-authored an article last year in True West magazine about just the kind of the name that's been given to Lincoln, the most dangerous street in America, and kind of following that up, because a lot of people say, well, I think you're over exaggerating it. Well, you know, not really. If you look at the numbers, it was pretty dangerous. And one of the things that Scott was able to do through some pretty impressive detective work was find the name of the up until that point unnamed Buffalo soldier.
The guy that got shot in front of the courthouse?
Exactly. He found his name. So
yeah,
that was really cool. You know.
I love that he does that stuff.
Yep. So
I really do, because most of us miss. You know, we just go with the big stuff and miss a lot of that neat little stuff.
Yeah, and it reminds you that these are human beings, right? These aren't just characters in a movie. These are people.
Right.
So
and and they all had their own dreams and hopes and all that other stuff, just like we do, and also their own flaws. It's, you know, the only people that come off as being truly villainous in the Lincoln County War, I think, is Selman's scouts.
Huh.
Who, for the sake of anybody listening, they were a group of outlaws who came up here from El Paso to take advantage of the lawlessness that was going on in Lincoln County. And to my knowledge, they're the only people who committed the crime of rape up here. I don't think that happened otherwise.
Interesting.
But it's, you know, but they were awful bad guys. I think, and I'm pretty sure this happened because Bob Speaks was never heard of after the incident. But supposedly Bob Speaks was one of Selman's lieutenants, and he argued some minor point of tactic or something with Selman, who walked around behind Speaks while he was cooking something at the campfire and shot him in the back of the head.
Huh.
Just for disagreeing with him.
Huh.
Yeah, there's a famous picture that has Bob Speaks in it and a couple of the Jones boys. That is all. They frequently people want to claim that the fourth man in the photo is Billy, but he's not. But you've seen the picture, I'm sure. It's four guys, two sitting, two standing.
Yep, I know the picture. Yeah, which
he's the one with the big fancy mustache.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So that was actually one of the comments. We had some questions coming. I'm getting Ben is asking Scott's full name. Scott Smith. Gregory Scott Smith is his full name. Really awesome guy. So one of the questions, and this comes up a lot, the pictures, right? I think people will ask us, at least ask me a lot, and I'm sure they ask you a lot, which pictures are accurate and which ones are, and I think people get upset when you don't take a stand, right? When you're ambiguous. But I think as historians and researchers, we have a very high level of standard when it comes to, provenance of anything, an artifact. It doesn't matter. And it's okay to say maybe, but people don't like to hear that. They want to hear yes or no, right?
Yeah, and that's too tough, because there's about 1 million pictures out there claiming to be Billy, but as far as I know, there's only one that's really him.
Yeah, and I completely agree. There's a bunch of pictures out there that I would go on the record as saying maybe, right?
Yeah, me too.
And
in fact, there was one in particular that was more than a maybe for me, but that's neither here nor there because it had no provenance, so it's just an old photo.
Gotcha. So we got a question from George Bailey, and I can answer some of this about the coins, and I think the cartridges are just happenstance, or people put them there because of the situation. But he said he visited the Tunstall murder site, which is a really unique place to go. Unlike all the movies from the 1930s, it does not look like Monument Valley out there.
No.
But he's asking, there are some coins and cartridges left on the memorial, as well as some marbles. And he's asking, do we know why somebody would have left marbles? I don't.
I have no idea why anybody would have left marbles. But please, George, I love you, and it's a wonderful wife. Just kidding, of course. No, I don't know why anybody would leave marbles, but that's a very popular camping spot and has been for decades. So there are occasionally people who pop up and say, "Look, I found the casing that the bullet that killed John Tunstall came from," and they didn't find that. They kind of manufactured it, but people are always, trying to sell stuff that has no provenance, and that's always a bad thing for us, people like us, because, all we can do is say, no thanks.
Sure. Yeah, so if anybody is, the Tunstall murder site is not that far from Lincoln. It's 10 miles as the crow flies, but it does take some, you got to know where you're going.
You do.
They're not, but it's a really neat place to go out and see if you're interested in this period of history. It really gives you an idea of distance, I think, Drew, would you say? I mean, I think it gives you a good idea of what the gun battle was like, because the regulators were down in the canyon, as you know, and when the posse came up basically on that road where we always park and saw them, they started shooting immediately, and they were hundreds of yards away, but they were looking for trouble, as obvious, and when the main group took off after Brewer and the others, and Tunstall's confused behind was spotted by the 4 men who killed him, it just, it became an execution. But I used to take people up there, and it was always fun to, describe it and talk about it and everything. But I got to say, I'm 70 now, and I don't want to climb up that canyon again. I've seen it enough. No, it's not. It's a little rugged. It is neat to go out there though, because I don't think a lot of people know, and I'll segue into a personal question for you. But there are some really good. The closest thing we have to eyewitness accounts through the interviews and depositions that were done during the Angel report that summer of 1878, including most of the men who were with John Tunstall that day. Now, of course, they didn't actually see the deed, but they were there. So you can go up to that site and you can read those accounts, and you can look around on the geography, and you can see exactly where everything happened. It's all right there, spelled out for you.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So Frank Angel was a Department of Justice special investigator that was sent out to New Mexico to investigate a few things, not just the Lincoln County War that erupted that year. But Drew, remind me your personal connection to Angel.
Oh yeah, my grandfather worked. My family came from a town in New Jersey, of New York, and it's right next to Jersey City, which is where Frank Angel retired to, and for some reason needed a bodyguard. So my grandfather he was a big guy, he hired on as a bodyguard, which turned out to be a very convenient thing for my family and save them from real personal connection with it.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty interesting. And you didn't find out about that till pretty later in your life, right?
I didn't. Actually had to put it together because the family always said that thank God your grandfather got that job with the Angel, and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And then I finally, when somebody said something about the Angel had been out west in New Mexico or something, I was like, oh my God, you're talking about Frank Angel. And then I began to put it together and figured it out.
Interesting. It's funny how that, come full circle. So,
yeah.
So, just, we could talk all day about the details of all these events. I'm looking through some of the comments and trying to find some. Here's an interesting one. And we've already talked about the fact that it's much more complicated than people make it out. What somebody asked, was William Brady a bad guy, a villain? And I think that's a very complicated question, but it's interesting.
It really is.
That he was a pretty well respected member of the community, correct?
Well, yeah, but he also appears to have been pretty deeply in Jimmy Dolan's pocket also. So, you got those two things.
Sure.
But he was generally liked, I think. In fact, the day they shot him, he stopped in the street to talk to a local woman who was walking the other way, and then he had to hurry up to get back to his men, and he left her with a laugh. And of course, as soon as he got back to his men, the regulators opened fire from the alley, and that was that. But it's very difficult to view Sheriff Brady as a good person or a bad person. I don't know. I know in the regulators' eyes he was evil incarnate, but that was only because he was their enemy, and he had kind of pushed his luck with the kid and Fred Wade, both of whom were in the assassination party. But as you know, that was an impromptu assassination. Nobody was out there all night cutting tiny holes for rifles.
Yeah, that's
thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's one of those things that they always get wrong in the movies, right? They always make it out like this was this premeditated thing that the regulators, snuck into town to commit this assassination, and much more likely, as evidence suggests, it was almost a crime of passion, really, impromptu.
Just impromptu. They saw him out there. They said, "Hey, there's Sheriff Brady. Let's kill him."
Yep.
Which and I'm sure nobody thought about what Dick Brewer was going to say about that until after they did it. We got to go tell Dick now, because by all accounts he was furious.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He just sent them in for supplies, not to kill the sheriff.
So, yeah, and
I like to point out, politically speaking, it's always a bad idea to kill the sheriff, both then and now.
No, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's interesting that that was the crime, that particular murder, because you can't call it anything else. I mean, that's exactly what it was. It was a murder.
Oh yeah, it was an assassination.
I mean, there was not self-defense. There was no justification in that regard. That was the crime that Billy was ultimately held accountable for.
I know. Ironically enough, because I am not sure that he ever fired at Brady himself. Because Billy Matthews was nicked in the arm by a bullet, and the kid and Matthews hated each other on the first volley. And I got a feeling that was the kid who was shooting at Billy Matthews. And and Brady went down riddled, of course. But whether or not one of those bullets that was in Brady was the kid's is anybody's guess.
Sure.
But Brady, as I said, he had kind of screwed up when he arrested. Well, actually, when the kid and Fred Wade walked into the courthouse with warrants for the killers of Tunstall, and Brady arrested them and then marched them down the street, kind of intending to embarrass them at gunpoint, which he did, and which neither of them forgot. So I think that whoever said let's kill the sheriff, it could have easily been the kid or Fred Wade or both.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that it's interesting how these little mini feuds keep popping back up, right? Obviously the kid had issue for a variety of reasons with Bob Ollinger, but even after the kid escaped, there was these reports that went out almost immediately that the kid had murdered. And they were wrong, but that feud between those two men were so well known that they assumed the first thing he was going to do when he broke out of prison was find Billy Matthews and kill him. So
right, and that's not what he did.
No. That's another question that came up in the comments. Why didn't Billy leave? Either before he was arrested captured at Stinking Springs, or after he escaped the courthouse. And everybody, I've got my own opinions on that. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is that he really was a kid, and that he was bulletproof. Although it's hard to kind of settle, work that with the idea of, he was an experienced soldier in the Lincoln County War. He was the only person, I think, at all that was in virtually every single skirmish. And, he was a very seasoned soldier, so I can't really match that up with him thinking he's bulletproof. But at the same time, like I said, he's a kid. And I know after his escape from the courthouse, why he didn't leave, I'm pretty sure the answer is Paulita Maxwell.
Oh, okay.
And I think he was trying to get her to run away with him. This is just my opinion, of course, but I think he was trying to get her to run away with him, and I think in another day or so, she might have gone with him. But then Garrett got wind of him being in Fort Sumner, thanks to her brother, by the way, and rode up there and killed him. But I think if it had been a few days later, the kid and she might have run off to old Mexico.
Huh.
No telling.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always just been interesting to me, why he chose not to leave. Another question: Where was Billy the Kid born? That's a great question. I'd like to know.
Yeah, me too. Fred would really like to know. We don't know. At the moment, the best bet seems to be New York State, not New York City, as has always been stated in books and so on. I've seen the birth certificates that came out of New York City. There's a Catherine Devine who married a guy named McCarty, and they had a son named Henry. But it's not. I don't think it's the same one, because I don't know. It's impossible to say right now until they find somebody. Another thing that ties in with his real birthplace and everything is his name. The name he actually manufactured for himself, Billy Bonney. Now it's been the theory has been put forward that he did use the name Bonney because that was his father's real name.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
But yeah, I don't know, but it's kind of an interesting approach.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, that whole, it's, I've tried to go back and, it's, you try to find where the stories start, right? Like the gun in the outhouse, trying to figure out, okay, where was the first place that was pinned to paper, or was it a interview with somebody? Trying to figure out that, and the same thing about this situation too. His birthplace. At the first, I honestly thought that the first place New York was mentioned was in Pat Garrett's ghostwritten book. The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. But
if it's in there, then it is.
Yeah,
that was written in 1882. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it is in there. But I recently saw a newspaper article from right after he left Mesilla on his way up to Lincoln, and the author there stated that he had been born in New York. So I don't know where that came from. Did it actually come from his own mouth then? Because this guy knew him?
No, actually, a census taker in Fort Sumner, when the kid was staying with Charlie and Manuela Bowdry, presumably, although it's a pretty big jump because the census takers then and now talk to anybody who answers the door. So it could have been Manuela Bowdry just kind of guessing. But if it was the kid, he told the census taker that he was born in Missouri and that he worked in cattle by trade, which kind of sounds like him, actually.
Yeah,
but I don't know where the Missouri part comes in, because Missouri's been run dry trying to find them, and nobody has.
Huh, that's interesting.
Birth certificates in those days not exactly accurate.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, when you're going through those sorts of records, it becomes really difficult when someone's name or the information that you have to say weed out other possibilities. Henry McCarthy in New York, in the during that time period, especially the late 1840s and 1850s, with that huge migration of Irish people to that area. So it's very difficult to try to figure out, if somebody's, I think there's a lot of maybes. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, and as you know, we got to be a little more specific.
Sure. So we got another question, and I know what your answer is, and I know what my answer is. Is Billy's body actually buried 300 yards from where I'm sitting in Fort Sumner?
Generally.
Yes. Is it still there? That's questionable because of the shifting, floods and things like that. But was he put into the ground here in Fort Sumner in July of 1881? In my opinion, 100% yes, no question.
Absolutely.
So
no doubt about it.
So and people ask me, there's so much overwhelming evidence to that, and then there's this much smaller body of what I don't necessarily even want to call it evidence, but these anecdotes and things. But people latch on to like that one thing, and they refuse to see the mountain of evidence on the other side.
Oh yeah.
So
I get a lot of people who don't want to believe anything other than Billy lived a long life.
Sure,
that's what they want to think,
yeah.
And I like Billy too. I'd like to think that it happened, but it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, we all do, right? I mean, and I honestly think it's interesting that it wasn't until after Billy's ascension as this social Robin Hood that you had people come out of the woodwork and say he was him, right? You didn't have somebody in the 19 teens when he was still viewed as a cold-blooded killer and also wanted for murder. That people were like, hey, I'm Billy the Kid. Like nobody wanted to take on that moniker at that point. But after he became a hero, all of a sudden now, maybe it's not so bad to be Billy the Kid. So
yeah, that's the way he's seen now. But I think, like I said, I think that's going to change again.
Yeah. I've always wondered, there's no statute of limitation on murder, right? So I've always wondered, when say Brushy Bill Roberts showed up in Santa Fe, why didn't they, if he was sitting there saying that I am William Bonney, why didn't they just throw him in? Why didn't they lock him up? He was still wanted for murder. I've always wondered that if they honestly believed him, or there was a shred of evidence that was real, because we don't know what that conversation was inside the governor's office. They should have just arrested him.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's a good indication of why they didn't, though, because nobody believed that dopey story.
Sure. Yeah.
Brushy Bill.
Yeah. So we're getting down to the last minutes here, Drew.
Okay.
Just do you have anything else you wanted to add? I know you're working on a lot of things right now, and I'm always excited to hear your new findings and your take on these things.
Well, I would like to add something, although it's not related to the Lincoln County War.
Oh, go for it, please. I think people would love to hear it.
The famous story about Wild Bill Hickok and the dead man's hand.
Yes.
Aces and eights.
Yep, aces and eights.
Well, that story was never circulated until 25 years after Hickok's death. That's the first time you'll find it print anywhere.
Oh, see, and that's like what we were talking about earlier, right? It's like the lowest common denominator. Figure, you got to take it back, and then that's interesting, huh? Wow.
Well, yeah, because it makes sense. I mean, somebody just shoots him in the back of the head, and there's going to be somebody in that bar that's going to go, "Hey, what kind of hand was he holding?"
Yeah, that probably was not the most pressing matter at hand at the moment.
No, it wasn't. I don't think.
So, speaking of Wild Bill Hickok, I thought it was really interesting. We were both at an auction not this past January, but a January before, where quite a bit of ephemera related to Billy the Kid and a number of other well-known Western characters was sold. And one of the things that was sold at that was an authenticated Wild Bill Hickok straight razor, which I thought was really neat. So, and it was a beautiful piece. So,
yeah, it was.
So,
it was. The Tim is referring to the Bob McCubbin collection that was auctioned off in Mesa.
And I was actually going to mention that at the beginning of this article or this interview, Drew. We lost Bob McCubbin not that long ago, and I did not know him very later in his life, but I know you were friends with him for many years.
Yeah, he was a very good guy and an interesting guy, very generous, and boy, he sure had a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Some of which I don't know where it went, and I'd kind of like to know that, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, and
he was always who got John Wesley Hardin's personal photo album, but
oh, interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was always he was a friend to the historic sites, the state monuments. He was always willing to share his collection with us. We have a lot of facsimiles of letters and things, and he had a lot of really, really unique things associated with the Lincoln County War, and thankfully he was willing to share those things with us over the years.
Yeah.
So
it's thank God. I'm thankful that I knew Bob. The way I met him was at the time I was living in Florida, and I was studying up on John Wesley Hardin, and there was it's a full figure picture of Hardin. I wanted to get a copy of it, and I saw one in a book that had Bob's name under it. So I found out where he lived. He was in El Paso at the time, and I wrote him. And about a week later, I get this picture in the mail. It's already framed. And then a little note from Bob that said, "This was made from the original."
No kidding. Oh, wow.
And
guy.
I still have it, but but when I finally moved out here years later, I made a point of looking him up, and we hit it off, so it was great.
Gotcha. Well, I've got one last question, and you and I can tag team. This is a pretty simple one. Someone's asking, what happened to Godfrey Goss, who was almost an eyewitness to the escape? And the answer is he lived to a ripe old age. So
which he was almost at the time.
Yeah,
actually. I think he was about 60.
Yeah, I think he'd been born in the I can't remember exactly when, but he, the best we know, he was he had somehow been associated with the church in Germany. Some people say he was a priest, a deacon, or something like that. We're not entirely sure. But then he was he served as a hospital steward in the Civil War, and then of course, kind of did odd jobs around Lincoln for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I've been kind of interested over the years in the number of men in Lincoln County at that time who seemed to be defrocked Catholic priests, like Padre Polacco and Greslakowski, who had a huge family. He was a former priest, but guys like that. It's just like, really.
Well, I think that goes back to the at that point, if you needed to disappear or start over, what better place to go than the frontier, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You could blend in pretty well, which is another reason. I mean, Billy could have gone anywhere, and some of the regulators did. Doc Scurlock went off. John Middleton disappeared. Fred Waite went back to the Chickasaw Nation and almost became its president. So I mean, people could start over, right? Even if there was a warrant out for your arrest. In the New Mexico territory, you could leave. So
just leave.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
look at John Kinney.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. I mean, the guy ended up, living to a pretty old age himself. So
in Arizona.
Yeah.
And but he also I think he only, for all the incredible amount of murders and everything else he committed, I think he only did 3 or 4 years in prison.
Well, I mean, it's and not to get back into the weeds, but it always blows my mind that man, I don't know how many indictments and warrants he had out for his arrest. And he was deputized and sent on the party that brought Billy back to Fort Stanton before he went to Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, if you're Billy the Kid sitting in the back of that wagon, you're probably thinking, I'm not making it to Lincoln. Like, he was probably as surprised as
through his mind.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. So,
I think that had a lot to do with they always talk about his on the way back up to Lincoln, his stopping at the gunfight that killed Buckshot Roberts, stopping there at Blazer's Mill and doing a comical reenactment for the posse.
Yeah.
I always wondered if maybe that comical stuff was like, let's keep things light, guys, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe he was making it up.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, Drew. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I really appreciate it. You have always been I've been out here for almost 4 years, and you've always been what I consider a mentor, and I appreciate that, and being very supportive of what we're doing down at Lincoln and the historic site. So, we'll, I'm excited to hear about this project you and Scott are working on. If you need any help or anything, let me know.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
and hope you're.
All right, Tim, thanks for calling, buddy.
Yeah, and I hope you're doing well and staying healthy, and I'm sure we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Hopefully.
All right,
I like to be seen. All right, take care.
All right, take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Fine.
Yeah, so that was a great conversation. I love talking to Drew, and I hope people learned a little bit out of it. And we got some good questions. I apologize for the audio.
You can probably hear me now.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
had you muted me? I took a phone call and
yeah. We couldn't hear you. No worries. So thanks so much everybody for showing up and supporting the Friends of History. This Wednesday lecture series is always a great time. The topics you guys have is always fantastic. I've been fortunate and thankful to you guys to invite me out for one of these, and I was scheduled to do one in June, and this is kind of taking its place, but I'd love to get back up once we get doing these things live again and get back up on the stage, so to speak, and do something else. So
yeah, and Tim, I really want to thank you again. I mean, we're I think as a first run, it was it went well, and we'll learn as we go, and that will be good. And of course, we always look forward to having you all up in Santa Fe when the Hit Museum reopens again. Do make a point. I give a shout out to Drew for giving us his time and having the conversation. I think it was very informative, and we much appreciated that he would do this, particularly in this COVID time.
Sure. No, I know. Yeah, I meant what I said. Drew has always been a supporter of state monuments, historic sites, and the state of New Mexico in general. And anytime I call for a question or something like this, he's always willing to jump right in. So
well, that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we can compare notes later as well. I mean,
okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I did want to mention. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but we're kind of collaborating to some extent, not a huge extent, but I know the Farm and Ranch Museum down in Las Cruces is planning a Billy the Kid exhibit soon, and it's a really unique exhibit. It's Billy the Kid from kind of the view of the cow, right? So his connection to, I mean, that was it, all right? I mean, he was so connected to the ranching community and the culture here, both as a laborer, but also as somebody, that was not exactly looked favorably upon by most of the ranchers in eastern New Mexico. So that's going to be a really cool exhibit. And we've contributed, Historic Sites has contributed some things from our collections, and I'm excited about that. So, Billy the Kid is always an exciting topic. At Historic Sites, we really think of his story as, it's not so much about the what, but it's about the why. Why was he here? Why, how can we use him as a way to talk about kind of broader cultural and historical situations in New Mexico during that time? And he really is, in some ways, he's not as unique as I think people have made him out to be. We can really use him as a conversation piece about what was going on here during that time. His story although it was unique, in some regards, many regards, in some ways it wasn't. He came out here because his mom was sick, right? They were health seekers. There are lots of health seekers, all kinds of reasons that connect him to a broader history in New Mexico. So anyway, we're always excited to talk about him. He's always a fun topic. So
good.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Tim. And,
all right. And did you want
everyone for participating?
Yeah. Is there another, anything that the Friends of History has coming up anytime soon?
We're exploring some options.
Okay.
And, as soon as we have the information, we'll get it out.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. Ben, thank you so much for the invitation. And we will see you guys later.
All right. Be safe. Be well, everyone.
All right.